Uh, okay, I welcome you as General Plan B coordinator to this workshop on noise pollution and its impact, of course, on biodiversity. Um, we have worked out an agenda with contributions from, and I will show shortly the agenda with sharing my screen, with contributions from inside and from outside our own consortium. So it will be an interesting afternoon, and also all participants are well asked, and I hope you are willing to share your opinions, because we left out 40 minutes at the end to discuss some ideas that we have in relation to the policy brief, because Plan B has to finish a policy brief on noise pollution and its impact and mitigation and so on terrestrial the biodiversity, and this is due at the end of January, so it is within 2 months. There's not so much time left, but we are on track, and it is the time to share some of our scientific work and to get your opinion on the ideas that we have, and also to capture, of course, your ideas at the end of the workshop. So it is as follows, that each presenter has 15 minutes. We then have 5 minutes for questions. Perhaps there is also a chat function in which you can type your questions. It's sometimes easier. And these are then questions, but the comments and opinions, please leave them for the 40 minutes we have at the end of the workshop. So our first presenter, and we are very glad to have her here. She cannot stay long, but nevertheless, we are very glad that we have Lise Dogsater from our sister project, Aquaplan. And Aquaplan has some experiments in their project. It's very interesting, of course, on noise and also light in the offshore environments, because Aquaplan, well, has in fact the same topic than we, but in the non-terrestrial environment, and we are concerned in Plan B with terrestrial environment, but it is interesting to share our ideas. So I welcome you, Lise, and you have the floor, and I will now stop with sharing my screen so that you can share your screen.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'll see if I can share my screen again. Yes. Okay. And if you have any questions or things that needs to be clarified throughout the presentation, just speak out, because it's difficult to pay notice on hands as I go. Yes, thank you for the introduction. And as said, I am part of the Aquaplan project, which is the sister project of Plan B, and I will talk about just one of the case studies that we have in that project. By large, the Aquaplan project stands for Aquatic Pollution from Light and Anthropogenic Noise, Management of Impacts on Biodiversity. The challenge that we try to look at in the project is that there has been an increase in our understanding of both light and noise pollution, but they are always studied separately just by the one pollution. And there is a broad range of species known to be impacted by either of these pollutants. And they are occurring globally in all aquatic ecosystems, from rivers and lakes to the seafloor. And there is a lot of different partners in the project and investigating a lot of different habitats. However, since I work at the Institute of Marine Research, I will present the offshore experiments that we have been conducted in northern Norway. Offshore habitats. First of all, coastal areas such as harbors, rivers, etc. have been recognized as often with high exposure of light and noise. Offshore habitats are, however, often more pristine or considered more pristine. But there is an increasing amount of shipping, oil extraction, and especially the later years, offshore wind farms are developing in offshore areas. And they will increase the noise and artificial light at night pollution from anthropogenic sources. So in this task that is part of work package 4, we have looked at light and noise from offshore shipping. And the animals that we are focusing on are whales, in particular humpback and killer whales, fish, and in particular herring, and seabirds. So first, just a little bit of background. Since you are terrestrial people, I will share a little bit about fish, sound, and light. Actually, all fish have good hearing. And in particular, they hear very well in the low frequency that are emitted by ships and also operational wind farms, for instance. And we know from studies that sound, such as an approaching vessel, are known to cause fish diving. As we can see in this figure here, it's a bit blurry, I see, but this is depth we see here. This is the surface, and this is the swimming depth of fish, in herring in this case. So this is the normal swimming depth of fish, and as the vessel is approaching, we see that the swimming depth of the fish decreases, so they are diving deeper and then slowly coming back towards their normal swimming depth after some time. Light is also important for fish, and many species of fish, they have something we call diel vertical migration. That is that during the night, when it's dark, they swim close to the surface to feed, while at daytime, when it's light, they go deeper to hide for predators. And this is an example of a cod that has been tagged. And these different dots, they are the depth recordings or the swimming depth of the individual cod. So this is the surface and this is depth. And then we have time. And we see that this cod here, at nighttime, it's swimming quite close to the surface. And when the sun starts to rise, it swims deeper, and then it's found below 30 meters during daytime before it again ascends to the surface at night. So we know that fish, they tend to dive in response both to sound and light exposure. However, the combined effect of these two anthropogenic stimuli have not been addressed with fish previously. So, therefore, we headed out to northern Norway to do field work in approximately a year ago. Yeah, that's where we did our study. We used an IMR research vessel, and the study set up both for fish and whales, or as you can see here. We had the research vessel, we had a speaker, that is a sound source basically, that we played back recordings of ship noise. And we recorded the sound at 20 meters and 30 meters. And the light stimuli we used was basically to switch off all the deck light of the vessels. And then when we did exposure, we put it all on. And these are just some photographs of the equipment. And now I will focus on the fish part. And we did it with herring, which are very abundant in these areas during winter time. We used our research vessel's echo sounder to get an estimate of the abundance and the swimming depth of the fish. So we conducted block design experiments with 10 minutes of noise exposure, 10 minutes of artificial light at night exposure, and 10 minutes of boats. And these were done in randomized order, of course, with a break in between them for the fish to habit or to get back to their normal. So an echo sounder gives us what we call an echogram. So what we see here is basically the amount of fish at different depths. So this is the surface, this is the bottom, and here is 100 meters, 200, 300 meters. And the color indicates the amount of fish that we see. So this is just measured sound levels at 30 meters. So we can see the recording simulates an approaching ship. So the sound is increasing before it's decreasing again. And this is also just the light stimuli where we see it's, this is at 30 meters. It's then, and then it's increasing while we put on the light. So this is the interesting part. Here we see the results from herring. So what we see in this echogram is that this is a layer of herring distributed at around 160 meters depth. The stronger the color you see here, then indicates that it's more of the fish. So we see here, we have an exposure of both light and noise. And we see immediately a little drop here, which means that either the herring swim down or they go from staying like this to going like this. And we see that there seems to actually be an increase in density of fish. You see the same thing here, approximately after the light stimuli goes on, there is this drop. However, you don't see a very strong reaction to the noise alone. In another day, we did the experiment when the herring was much closer to the surface. So then, of course, both the noise and the light were stronger for them. And here we see a very clear reaction to the noise, that the abundance decreased and also that the fish seemed to go down a bit. And when we did the combined stimuli, the reaction was very clear. We see that a lot of fish apparently disappear out or away, as well as they are diving downwards. And similar when we did just the light stimuli, they're swimming downwards and also away. As you can see, it goes from red to green. We haven't finished all the analysis statistically from this experiment, but it does seem that the herring respond to both noise and light exposure by diving deeper and swimming away. And the response seems most pronounced late at night when they are closer to the surface. And response to both stimuli may be stronger than to just one of the exposures. So what does this mean? Well, we know that diving or avoidance of a stimuli is something that requires a lot of energy. And they might do this instead of feeding. So they spend energy instead of gaining energy. And if this is repeated over time, it may result in less investment in reproductive output, which is the essential part for having recruitment to the population. And the combined effect of the two exposures may result in a stronger response than just one alone. And that highlights the importance of studying anthropogenic disturbance by multiple pressures and their combined effects rather than studying one by one. We also tried to do experiments with whales and birds, and the intention was to get a tag on a whale so that we could measure its swimming depth as well as its behavior during exposures. However, it's quite difficult to tag whales in the wild, and especially in wintertime with waves, sea, and the dark coming in. So weather was highly limiting the operation. And we managed to tag only one humpback whale for the week that we were there. And we conducted the baseline, but then the tag came off. So unfortunately, we didn't manage to do any exposures. But we will have another field season this year. So hopefully we will then have some data on whales as well. Yes, so that was what I had. Thank you. Now we'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Are there some questions? It was very interesting. Of course, the whales, they have also to cooperate. We must send them a message without noise. No, are there some questions from other participants regarding your presentation?
Did I make a question?
Please.
Well, I must say that it's a very interesting presentation, but I would like to ask two questions. The measurements or the analysis were done only at night, because you say 10 minutes noise, 10 minutes artificial lighting, and the artificial lighting could be only at night, of course, because during the day there is only natural lighting. What do you think about what most influence the behavior of the fish? In my opinion, I'm not expert on marine. But I have the idea that the noise is more intrusive than the lighting, because due to the propagation of low frequencies that could propagate at long distances, it could be more intrusive than the light. What's your opinion about?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But of course, also my background is noise pollution, and that's what I've basically been working with. But as you said, light is a very local effect because it doesn't propagate very far, doesn't propagate very deep into the sea and not very far from the source, whereas noise can propagate for very long distances. So it has the potential to therefore influence a much larger area. So I absolutely agree with you that I think noise might be the most influencing factor, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
I see in the chat there is also a question about possible cooperation. Perhaps we don't have to raise that here orally, but are there other questions?
Is it Reinhard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reinhard, please.
Yeah. Very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. My question is, I mean, we have the interesting case that we have in a difference in the media, and noise pollution might be different in different media. So the situation in air or in soil is probably very different from that in water. And I know that energy pressure and also the hearing abilities of sensitivities of species in water are different. And we know that especially the new renewable energies like wind turbines, when they are these turbines are constructed, then there's a lot of noise. There are some mitigation measures, but how would you think to weight this, to evaluate it? Is it dangerous? There are some discussions, and can the mitigation measures really help to avoid or to really to mitigate these consequences?
Yeah, when it comes to wind turbines, there are different phases that make noise. First, you have the construction phase where you have what they call pile driving, which is basically when you hammer these turbine fundaments into the ground. And that's really, really loud, but impulsive, and it lasts for a short time. And that you could relatively easy mitigate by having, for instance, bubble curtains around, which will reduce the sound level around the pile that you are hammering down. And then the worry for these is that can actually damage fish and marine mammals by giving them hearing impairment, giving them reduced hearing. But also, it's a big worry that during operation, which will last for decades, these turbines, they emit low frequency continuous noise. That is, it's not loud enough to give them hearing impairment, but it can, for instance, mask other important sounds from communication signals, for instance, or it can make that you don't hear a predator that is coming towards you. So there is a lot of these effects that we don't really know how they will affect fish. And for instance, we know that these turbine structures, they seem to attract a lot of fish because there is a lot of food there. But if they don't come there and they're impacted by some other issues, so that they might perhaps not reproduce well enough, that's an important effect to look into.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have seen that Dick has raised his hand also. You have a question, Dick?
Yes. So very interesting study, and also the thing you just mentioned about wind turbines. I've seen other studies on that as well, but it's related a bit because you, for the herring, you introduce some light and noise, and the herring responds. Now, in offshore facilities, there will be light and noise all the time, not just for half an hour or so. So do you think the fish will adapt and come back in the end? And if they do so, are they becoming prey of something else? Because you said in the beginning they dive to avoid some dangers during the day because of seabirds, I assume, or something. So is that an effect that could occur?
Yeah, it could be like the diel vertical migration that I described, where they come to the surface to feed during nighttime. If there is light 24/7, then kind of the clue to start going towards the surface will probably never come because it's light all the time. So it might cause them to not actually have this diel vertical migration, that they might stay deeper during the full 24 hours, and then they might not race to the area where there is a lot of food. But also their food, you do this vertical migration. So you might end up with all the fish staying deeper down. Yeah, I don't know, but it's a possible effect. I just wanted to highlight that there are all these natural cycles that we might interrupt.
And you don't expect them to adapt? Like, I assume some fish have adapted to wind farms and they come there, although they didn't go there before.
Yeah,
for other reasons than the wind farm, of course.
Yeah, they might adapt and they might stay there because it might be a good habitat to be in, because there might be a lot of food there. But again, there might be other pollutants or stressors that are not good to them. So yeah.
Okay, I see there is also a question about Alan, but because we are now more, it is a question, we can let that perhaps in the chat. Are there urgent questions? And I see Reinhard's hand is up.
Yeah, rather a remarks than a question, but I think because of the differences in both realms, we really need some more discussion about the similarities and differences in the effects and impacts in the marine, in the aquatic, and in the terrestrial area. I guess this is really important also for the policy brief to show these differences and work more out, because very often people, politicians, and also the administration focus either only on projects working on this or on in the terrestrial realm. But for the I think we need a more harmonized concept and framework to address the problems in the right way.
Okay, Lisa, you want to add something? Well, it is a question of also internal cooperation, I think, between our two projects, which can be done, and there is already cooperation. So it's rather a matter for, then joins something about it, I think, with the researchers and the scientists of both projects. So I thank you, Lisa. It was very interesting. It was interesting also to have all the questions, because you cannot stay till the end. So thanks for that. I think we can now go to Dick and Timothy, Dick Bottledorn, and I see that I am muted. Oh no, I am not muted. Jorge raises his hand.
No. It was just to clap the presentation.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you for that. So we can now go to the presentation of Dick Bottledorn and Timothy van Rentergem about, the nature characteristics of noise and the influence on biodiversity, and also how the mitigation can be done and the monitoring. Please, I don't know who we will start, perhaps Dick. So I will mute myself and you can share your screen.
Yes, thank you, Geert. Let me see. It's been a while since I presented in Zoom, so do you see the presentation mode now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. I should stop.
There is a green button, the share button in Zoom, and then you have to open it also on your screen. Then if you choose the screen to share, it should go. Yeah, it's you are right now, and so,
Okay.
yeah, the presentation is done.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, we conceptualize this as a bit of a preparation of our policy brief on noise and biodiversity. So thinking from that perspective, the first part is to reflect on the role of sound for animals and some plants. And well, it's sound, and I would extend it to vibration, is mainly used for being aware of the environment, for becoming aware of the environment, and therefore also part of the consciousness of where I am and what is the environment. And actually, since many, many years ago, millions of years ago, some sort of vibration sensing device has evolved, as you see here in the graph. And only more recently, it became something like an ear, and it evolved from a jaw environment to an hearing organ.
Dick, you're still on the first slide.
Oh, I'm still on the first slide. Okay. So I should probably stop sharing then. Sharing the wrong window, or am I sharing the presentation view?
I don't think so.
Okay, sorry. I'll stop and I share again. I need to share what? This one? This better?
Wait.
Are we now on the first content?
Yes, now it's good.
Okay,
Yes,
perfect. So yes, I was just saying that hearing, an important thing to realize is to become aware of the environment. And as the graph shows, it's been evolving over a long time from very simple vibration sensing cells in animals to more evolved hearing organs long time ago. So taking this into account, the fact that the hearing gives us information, or give the animals and some plants information about the environment, we should consider more than a dose, more than just saying it's so many dB, that's it. But it also has meaning for a particular animal or for a particular plant. So therefore, we have to distinguish between different types of sound. And one way we do that for humans is that we look at exposure-effect relationships, not for sound as a whole, but for a particular type of sound. For example, cars passing by, or industrial sound, or neighbor sound, or so on and so on. So we specify the sound source, or airplanes, and so we specify the sound source, because each sound source has a different meaning for us. So to make a bit of sense in this broadness of sounds, we have started now together with TC Noise. Well, we will actually start in December, a initiative to create an ontology of the sounds that surround us. And I just want to use that here because we can classify sounds from a different perspective, from the way it is perceived, or maybe also from perceived by humans in that case, or from a soundscape ecology standpoint. So a car pass by may be in different branches. But if we turn now to an animal, things become even slightly more difficult, because, for example, for humans, we would discuss laughter as a particular human sound that influences us in a certain way. At the same time, we would say an insect chorus is something that influences us in a certain way. But for our little friend, the cricket here, the insect chorus is probably a lot more variance in it than the laughter would be like all human sounds. So how you classify sounds and what you look at is going to be dependent on the species. So that brings us probably too far, but at least we should be sure that the different species we are looking at can actually hear the sound. So how could we assess that? The first idea would be to say, well, whatever you can hear is somehow relevant for you. So audible sounds disrupt, for example, they avoid you from confirming that the environment is safe. So in that way, you would look at the hearing level weighting. So even looking at how the internal ear looks in birds, for example, here the example of a chicken, or in mammals, you see that the basal membrane and the cochlea are very different, which already tells you that probably the frequency range, because the cochlea works for detecting frequencies, is going to be very different in birds and mammals. So how do we assess all of that? We can look at behavioral tests. In humans, that's tonal audiometry. There are a lot of threshold detection things for animals also. It may involve some training. You can also look at ABR. That means putting electrodes and see if you catch the signal. Be aware, don't mix them up, because there is 30 to 40 dB difference between them. In addition, we very rarely have information about masking, because mammals are very good in disentangling the sound in particular frequencies and time variations. Some and other animals may not be as good in demasking the environment from the sound they're interested in. So I took a few examples here of the human and deer and cat and barn owl and songbird. So two birds with very different hearing, because of course the owl needs to find food, looks at some high frequencies, more or less the same as a cat. The cat has a broader hearing range. So we see some of the differences between the different species that are, well, order of magnitude 20 dB easily, not only spectrally, but also in amplitude of what they can hear, 20 dB. You can reason a long time about this, and a lot of this makes a lot of sense for the species you're looking at. But when we think about noise disturbance, for example, in this case, road, which is on the ground floor, and we have a flat terrain, 1,000 vehicles per hour, 90 kilometers, which would be a usual main road in the countryside. And we look at a function of distance. For example, the blue one here, depending on the grass or forest floor, it's slightly different, but essentially this is the number of dB above the hearing threshold that the owl would hear. And if we compare that to a cat somewhere, the cat is here, the orange one, so it starts more or less at short distances the same, but when you go away from, the cat gets the advantage for catching the mice, because it's not going to be disturbed by noise as much. You see the black line here is the human. Also, you see very big difference. What's the big difference between the owl and the cat? It's the height. We simulated the owl at 5 meters, the cat at half a meter. You also see the deer at the lower height. They are very insensitive for the sound. It's of course, you don't have deer at 5 meter height. So you see a lot of differences between the species, and also as a function of distance. So something to be aware of. Second approach could be to look at disturbance. For disturbance, we checked, for example, communication in birds. That would mean that the sound can interfere with activity, with communication. So this is a paper we presented in Forum Acousticum last year, like first results from Plan B. So this is clustering of the song of different birds. Then you create some spectra from that, and you can figure out, for example, for the particular group of songbirds, this might be a good abstracted weighting curve. And then you can apply that. In addition to the A weighting we know that is working for humans, to a lot of measurements. This is from 40 dwellings in Flanders. It's on the back of the house on the front, so it's close to houses, so maybe not so relevant for biodiversity, but in any case, it gives you an idea. And you see that and overall there is a very strong correlation between the two, because if you're close to a noise source, whatever weighting you do, it's going to be louder than in the middle of the night, far away from any noise sources. So we see that, but we also see variations like a cloud of points. So it's definitely not a straight line. So another way of looking at how we should differentiate. Whether you hear a sound or not doesn't mean it's affecting you. So the idea there is to work with adverse outcome pathways. So this is a very preliminary sketch of some of them. And just thinking about the fish we were hearing about before, if we consider this path from ambient sound to vigilance, that's something that might be forgotten. So the animal may respond to a high level of ambient sound, and ambient sound, it's the continuous sound that's there. Well, it doesn't hear any danger that may occur, so it will become more vigilant. Stop feeding, so it has a negative effect on feeding because it's going to listen to the environment or even hide for much longer time than it would do. Of course, it will help to avoid being eaten, so it compensates prediction detection. So if you are not more vigilant, you're just more easily becoming a prey. But vigilance also comes with stress, and stress comes with health effects, and again, reproductive changes. And then, of course, if you look at biodiversity, you also have the dominance of certain species that may occur and other species may decline, and this may reinforce itself. So very, very complicated pathway. Not really sure at this moment how we can transfer that complexity of the animal world to policy, but okay, it's just a question I would also like to raise for the audience here, maybe for a discussion afterwards. When we start to look at the noise sources that surround us and how we would potentially treat them in the future, we have to realize that in contrast to light, for example, noise, often we don't make noise because we make it for speech and music, but in most other cases, we don't want to make noise. We want to move from one place to another. We want to transport some stuff. We want to mine something. We want to produce something. So all this technophony, it's just a byproduct of the activity, which gives us a other way of looking at mitigation measures than if you would produce the sound just because of music. You want to have high music levels, at the same time you want to have low music levels. So that's about tuning the level. But for transport and production, it's a little bit different, but we have opportunities to do something. When we start thinking about that, and Timothy will talk more about it in a moment, a nice framework to be sure that we capture everything, to understand and mitigate where we need to, is the DPSCR. Well, it comes from the OECD, but then driving forces and impacts and states, were added afterwards. So driving forces, we do an activity, noise is emitted, that's the pressure on the environment. You get a noise level, that's the state, and then it impacts the ecosystem, that's the impact. So DPSCR responses can then work on all these factors and also on the relationship between them. And I think this is the moment where I hand over the floor to Timothy. I keep presenting and you just say next or something?
Yes. Please keep your slides.
Okay,
so I assume you can hear me. So when talking about anthropogenic noise mitigation, in general, we can typically intervene at 3 points. First of all, we can try to limit the noise emission at the source. We can intervene along the propagation path. And thirdly, we could possibly do something near the receiver. So for human exposure, receiver measures do make sense. So think about positioning a sensitive room, for instance, a bedroom at the quiet side of a house, or trying to achieve enhanced acoustic insulation of a facade. But clearly, when talking about animals, so yeah, we'll only be able to rely on sources and propagation. So for the mitigation measures, of course, that's a very broad topic. So I'm going to focus on road traffic noise in the next slides. Yes, please, the following. Okay, there we are. Well, first of all, I can try to limit the number of sound sources. So take care of the logarithmical nature of decibels, however. So even strong measures with relation to, for instance, traffic intensity. Think about, for instance, halving the number of cars on the road. So might give you only 3 decibels. So traffic intensity reduction could work, but only when very drastic. So, and then we're actually talking about a ban of traffic on a particular roads. So this could also be a temporary ban, for instance, at night or during specific periods of the year, for instance, the breeding season. Some care is needed because your traffic will not suddenly disappear, but will reroute. So, and this can lead to some nasty side effects, namely other zones becoming higher exposed. Next slide, please. Well, I can also try to reduce the emission of individual sources. There might be some called autonomous evolutions. For instance, engines of electrical vehicles are much more silent compared to the common internal combustion engines on the roads nowadays. But a caveat here, so this might only work where vehicle speed is very low, because starting from about 50 kilometers per hour, rolling noise is a dominant contribution for road traffic noise exposure. Therefore, silent tires could be much more important, and they actually do exist. So because you might typically find difference up to 6 decibel between the noisiest and more silent commercially available tires. When looking, yeah, next please. Okay, sorry, yes. Yeah, please go back. So we're already there. Yeah. So when looking at road traffic management measures, so an efficient measure is speed reduction. So because we have this logarithmical dependency between rolling noise emission and vehicle speed. So and a reduction from, let's say, 120 km per hour to 90 km per hour will give you at least several decibels off. There are also measures aiming at traffic calming, so this can be mentioned as well. So in the understanding that, for instance, an accelerating car relative to a car at constant speed, well, that's again 3 to 5 decibel more. With relation to traffic management for noise reduction, social acceptance might be an issue here, but I think things are about to change, because now there are plenty of urban ring roads where speed limits are actually put in place, so mainly for air quality, but also increasingly for human noise exposure, and who knows, maybe for animal exposure as well in the near future. Okay, so we are at propagation related measures now. So first of all, a very basic law is keep distance from the sound source, because this will reduce your exposure levels. So the propagation factor here is what's called geometrical divergence. So also here we have this logarithmical dependence of distance. So, and actually quite interesting to know. So when you are rather close to a source, moving a little bit further can already lead to a significant drop in level. So that's a direct consequence of this logarithmical dependence. But for instance, if we are yet at a rather large distance from a sound source, further increasing the distance will not be efficient anymore. We might also try to exploit the ground effect. So essentially, this is about destructive interference and above natural porous soil, so this shifts to a useful frequency range. So we can, for instance, mitigate sound strongly when going from a rigid ground to, for instance, a piece of grassland, but also if we have a forest floor. So this ground effect can be further strongly enhanced compared to, for instance, a grassland. So what's key here is, of course, not compact your natural soil, because this porosity is an essential parameter here. And so we often see this because of applying machinery. And also plant litter, so leave it on the ground because it will help you to form a decent humus layer. We can also try to screen, of course. So then we're talking about noise walls, but in a natural area, for instance, a natural grown berm would, of course, be more suited, can be better integrated in the landscape. So yeah, we did quite some work on natural berms in our lab before, showing that they typically outperform a concrete noise wall in practice. An important condition, of course, is then again to safeguard this natural soil on the berm itself. So height of the objects is important, but do not underestimate the often strong needs for length of the barriers along roads. And so when talking about screening, most straightforward is maybe raising the landscape, for instance, with the already mentioned berm, but equally good could be depressing, lowering the landscape. So think about depressed roads, or even why not trying to locally depress the zone where you expect your receivers. So this both works perfectly fine. So it's based on the same diffraction process. Also, a dense tree belt along your road might work. So although this can be seen as a transparent screen, so it can actually work. Well, notice quite some misunderstanding on this abatement measure. So aspects that can play a role here is, of course, you will get a very good ground effect. So we're talking about a forest floor, but also the above ground vegetation could be helpful on condition that you go for high densities. So, and a single row of trees won't help you. So you need at least, let's say, 10 or 20 meters. So forget about the leaves. So we are talking here about the effect of trunks. So bigger structures, so more likely to interact with traffic sound frequencies. So reduction then arises from the multiple scattering process, and also to a limited extent bark absorption. Okay, so yeah, we further want to stress here the need for dedicated noise maps for anthropogenic noise exposure for animals. So there are a lot of noise maps around, and the widely available noise maps in the framework of the Environmental Noise Directive are actually not very suited, so for multiple reasons. First, essential propagation factors related to sound propagation in natural areas are not captured. So think about undulation of terrain, so different types of natural sounds, and also their combination. So often indicated as diffraction-assisted ground effects. Further note that these noise maps are, of course, strongly human-oriented. So first of all, the use of A-weighting. So it's inherently in the LDEN and L-night indicators. So accounting for as Dick already told, the human frequency-dependent sensitivity of hearing. So, and then that's in the understanding that, for instance, an intense frequency component for which a human ear is less sensitive, well, that's not so relevant for exposure. For animals, as you have just seen, so such loudness perception curves could be quite differently. So, and also note that LDEN is often seen as some kind of proxy for human noise annoyance, where levels, for instance, in the evening and night are penalized, so by famous 5 and 10 decibel, because evening period is considered to be a relaxation period for people, and night, of course, essential for sleep. But clearly, animals do not follow such timing, of course. And also, these maps use a standard receiver height of 4 meters, so bedroom window. So clearly disregarding, for instance, ground animals or birds in treetops. So for the noise maps we are going to make, so therefore we use 3 different receiver heights, so 0.5 meter, 5 meter, and 50 meter. And note that especially for this lower receiver height, so propagation modeling can be much more complex because ground and terrain effects could be strongly enhanced, so making these calculations especially challenging. Okay, so give back the word to Dick.
So to round up, we are short in time, but just very quickly, a few examples of alternative noise maps. So this is a small square kilometer area near a highway. So the red thing is a highway. It's somewhere in Portugal. I don't know exactly where, but the color gives us the indication of the level, and it goes from red, which is 70, to blue, which is 30. I'm going to compare just height and species to give you an idea. This is my 2 favorites again, the cat at 0.5 meter height and the barn owl at 5 meters. So here you see spatially there is much more small, quiet. It's a hilly terrain, so small, quiet areas if you go at low height than if you fly 5 meters above the ground. But essentially both have a similar sensitivity to noise, so you get more or less the same colors. If we compare that to human, which is less sensitive to noise, you see the color changes. I kept a human at 5 meters. It's not the popular height of size of humans, but it's because the European Noise Directive uses 4 meters, so it's the closest. This is then the songbird, much more blue, so they are less disturbed, especially when you go a little bit further away and in the valley. And then if we move to species at 0.5 meter, here's the comparison of the cat. Here's very well, low hearing threshold, and the deer, which much higher hearing threshold and also limited spectrum. So you see the differences here. Of course, the overall pattern stays the same. So yeah, different species, different heights make a lot of difference in the maps that we are producing. So with this, I thank you for your attention, and we are looking forward to your input for the noise policy brief that would emerge from this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick and Timothy, for this interesting contribution. Are there questions?
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Can I make a question? Questions or comments? Well, it was interesting. It's a very, very nice presentation. It has a summary of all the problems you can face with this within this issue. But one thing that astonishes me was how do you have measured or calculated the threshold of animals? It's easy for the humans, I understand. You have a noise, the people react, okay. But for the animals, like cats, like deers, how can you do that? It's a question about this issue. The other question that I would like to I would say, it's more a comment, I don't know. In your presentation, I noticed that the most part of the measures is measures based on the common measures at the receiver. So there are some additional aspects, but as the European Noise Directive proposes noise maps at 4 meters high, the measures we use, okay, reduce the cars, reroute other things, make barriers. So this is the normal measures for the humans. But there are some things that is in relation to the animals that could be different. What are the range of hearing of each kind of animal? Certainly they are different from humans. For instance, some animals are more sensitive to low frequencies. So the noise maps proposed by the European Noise Directive, they are, I would say, from 50 to 400 or to 800 hertz. So, and they are weighted in dBA. So, when you have this kind of different animals, they react differently. They have a capability of hearing different from each other. How can you manage all of this in this regard? And I understand the idea of making noise maps at 0.5 meters and 5 meters and 50 meters. Covers all the range of aids where the animals live in. It's not easy to do this, especially for public purposes, for governments to make all these kind of maps. Maybe this could be done in certain areas, specific areas, national parks like that. Okay, but these are my reflections, I would say. And I appreciate it very much that you have as an example a route in Portugal. Okay, thank you.
Particulars by chance. Maybe I'll answer first the stress question and how to manage, and maybe Timothy can talk about receivers and the measures, how they affect animals then.
Yeah.
So the stress.
The measures, but I'm talking about the more different species react different according to their frequency of hearing.
Yeah, I think that's I would say the easiest part. We don't know for all animals, especially the rare species will have nobody will have measured the hearing characteristics. But when you start to look at the similarities in the ear, and if you look in a species tree, I think you can find very strong similarities between hearing thresholds for groups of species. So if you have one animal, so like I don't want all the songbirds to have their hearing threshold. If I have 10, I probably have a good idea. That's not the difficult part. The difficult part is how does it affect them? How does it stress them? I mean, I give the example of the owl. So it needs to catch a prey. So how much is that 60 dB of traffic noise in his hearing, which is very loud for humans, but for this animal, it's probably not so loud because it's used to that. But how does it affect his behavior? And how does it affect stress? There are a few studies that looked at stress in some birds. So really stress like you do in humans, and even I think in inflammation and telomere length that may be affected, which is transgenerational and so on. So, but it's very rare. So I agree that that's a very tricky part of the whole story. So we'll need to make, well, okay, also have differences between humans. And at some point we said, this is the dose effect relationship. So forget about sensitive humans or less sensitive, or people with hearing damage, or people with ADHD or whatever. So also here. So I think that's the point for the stress and how to manage. Well, you could go for the worst case. I think it's not very feasible. Also the different heights. It's not very feasible to take the worst case. But I think we need to distinguish there between European noise maps and impact assessment. If you go for impact assessment, you may know that in this area, it may be a grassland or something, and you have a lot of species that are close to the ground, and you know the soil, and then you can do this specific noise maps, but not for the whole of Europe. So my idea would be that you find out what's the most endangered or most critical species for the ecosystem balance in a certain area, and then take it from that. But only locally, as you said, you cannot do it for the whole of Europe.
So this is not an idea to change the principles of the directives or to update the directive, but
yeah,
only only could be done in a process of environment impact assessment.
I'm not sure that we couldn't focus a little bit more on the biodiversity in the environmental noise directive as well, but then only with one set of additional maps or one or two sets, so not a lot of calculation effort. And if you do the weighting, it depends how you made the maps, of course, but usually the software will allow you to get octave band spectral information. So you can add a few weightings to that in addition to the A weighting. That's not critical. The height is more critical because you have to redo the whole mapping process.
Okay,
so I don't know, Timothy, do you want to say something about measures?
Yeah, I'm happy for the comment by Georgie. Actually, summarizing nicely the complexity we are dealing with. Yeah, and so actually the measures so I've been discussing here, well, they're actually very common measures, not specifically focused on animal protection, but yeah, at some point we might get big issues if, for instance, at this 50-meter receiver height, you cannot do a lot with relation to propagation. So if we're talking about animals with a high sensitivity in the low frequency range, so that's also, we know, even noise walls do not work. So yeah, I think there's quite some work ahead to come up with a good set of these measures specifically for biodiversity.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the explanation. It's very interesting, and of course, all of these need improvements. It's natural and research activities. We are always improving and doing more research. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you also for your question and comment. Are there urgent questions? Because we are becoming a bit behind the time. No, so then I can now give the floor to Reinhard. We are coming to the spacious bit more to wildlife and biodiversity. And we have Reinhard Klenke from Plan B, who will give us a presentation about that. Reinhard, you have the floor.
Can you see this? Okay, good. Then, okay, in some parts it's very similar to that what Dick already told, but yeah, I will talk about sound, noise, effects, impact, and mitigation on biodiversity. In general, in physics, sound is a vibration that propagates as an acoustic wave through the medium, such as gas, liquid, or solid. We have to keep it in mind because it's important for the organisms because they react in different ways to this. And it's working on the particle level, which is different to, or the atom level, which is different to light. And sound can be produced by various events, inanimate and animated matter, and it can be unintended as a byproduct of processes or produced intentionally. And organisms need special receptors and organs to measure this. In physics, we need measuring devices. Organisms need receptors and organs, and the reception of or perception of vibrations is called feeling, which is different from hearing, while the perception of special properties of sound and its interpretation as signals is called hearing. Sound can have many properties. It can be high, low, loud, soft, constant, modulated. This is also important to know. And organisms and also our measuring devices have different abilities to perceive or to measure sound. Humans can only hear sounds between 20 and 20,000 hertz. This is a common knowledge. But this hearing range of us humans defines what we call then infrasound and ultrasound, which is below or above that what we can hear. And organisms other than humans have different abilities to feel and to hear. They can perceive vibrations perhaps much better or also worse, or hear better or worse. And not only between the 20 and 20,000 hertz, but also in the range below and far above. As we already saw, that the auditory thresholds of the animals are highly variable across the frequency species spectrum, and different species can hear in a very different way. Meanwhile, we have collected a lot of such audiograms, these curves we can see in the diagram in a database. And we can compare to natural sounds. For instance, the range of sound, which is produced by moving water on the lower level, or of frogs and crickets, which is much higher. We can see the moving water has a very broad range from low frequencies to high frequencies, and frogs or crickets are higher. Foxes are around 1,000 hertz. Bird songs are very often between 1,000 and 10,000 hertz, but we have also birds which are calling or singing in the ultrasound range. And bat sonar, we can see the green here is mainly in the ultrasound area. Also the katydids, which is a group of grasshoppers living in the trees. This we have to keep in mind, and also the voice which we use or which the animals use to communicate has very different characteristics. Here we can see some examples from bird songs. The range is here between 1,000 and 12,000 hertz. It can be have a lot of frequencies, and not only one range, but also staggered. The flow over the time might be different. The intensity might be different, and it may have several harmonics, which means it's too difficult to explain loud, but there are a lot of characteristics which are important for the modulation of signals and transportation of information. So what we have to keep in mind is that each species has its own specific sensory organs, and within each species also each individual has its own unique abilities to use them, and to so everybody might of us, and also in the animals, might have hear in a different way and feel in a different way than the other individual. Not only can the environments of different species and individuals vary, but what they are able to perceive of those environments also varies. And organisms can not only feel vibrations and hear sound, they also can produce sound, of course. And they do this either without special organs, simply by movement, hitting the ground or objects, or they can produce this sound with special organs, giving them a voice. And the sound produced by organisms may have no intentional directed meaning, but very often it has a special meaning. And it is used for signaling and or multilateral, and and bidirectional communication. So these are processes of communication which can be disturbed also. So signaling and communication serves to send and exchange information. And they are important for adapting to situations, for instance, danger, social interaction, or various organismic functions, foraging, reproduction, habitat use, migration, etc. Noise is also sound, but it's chiefly unwanted. It is unintentional or harmful sound, considered as unpleasant, loud, or disruptive to mental or hearing faculties of humans, but also of other organisms. From a physics standpoint, there's no distinction between noise and desired sound, as both are vibrations through the medium, such as air or water or also soil. The differences arise when the brain receives and perceives the sound. Acoustic noise is any sound in the acoustic domain, either deliberate, for instance, music or speech, or unintended. We have to keep in mind, my noise is not your noise. So what I feel is noise, you might feel it's music. And the same is for other organisms. And of course, also one species can produce noise or a sound which is perceived by another species, not humans, as noise. So what other organisms besides humans perceive as noise depends on their anatomy and physiology, their hearing abilities, their modes of communication, their behavior, and of course also their environment. There are different qualities of noise, which make different types of effects. And noise is very often much related to disturbance. So we have a continuum, for instance, here between the disturbance and interference. So we may have a noise which is acute, infrequent, and startle the response, or we may have noise which is continuous or very frequent, sometimes masking or just annoying because it is over the whole time. We may have signals or sound, then noise, which is predictable or not predictable, which has different intensities, which has different frequencies. So, whether it is disturbing or annoying or harming depends on the type of sound, the time, the frequency, and also the loudness, and of course of the abilities, again, of the organisms which perceive it. And we have this distance effect. Dick and Timothy showed already something. So we have over the distance from the signal a reduction of the sound pressure. But the reaction to this might be continuous, for instance, like more animals will settle in some area far from the sound source than very near to it, or there might be breaks. So from a certain level on, it will become more, and below it will be much lower. So the erection might be very different. And we can see then also the propagation of the signal from a sound source might be different, and the spatial patterns in this distance might be different than from this. There was also research looking on the, how should I say, how noise is perceived and how loud it is perceived. And this curve, this smooth curve, is taken from humans, and it shows a very few are very sensitive, and they feel annoyed already very early on very low intensities of noise, and then up to the noise level of between 60 and 70 decibels, half of the population will feel annoyed. And then it takes still a while, but there are definitely 100% of people which will feel annoyed and harmed above 90 or 100% of 100 decibel. And they ordered studies with different methods in the terrestrial area here. And then they posted to the marine area. And here the black points are studies which were made for animals in the marine area. And we can see that in the marine area, we can see it also on the x-axis. The noise level might be much higher. The energy which is transported in fluid medium might be much higher than in air, and also perhaps much more harmful. There was a lot of studies about noise, and especially in different environments, like cities, areas like transportation, industrial construction, and military. And some of them measured the noise, some estimated, some didn't reported information. Same was reporting about acoustic measurements or recording of the spectra. Very often we have papers which give some information, but not the whole information. This makes it very difficult to compare them and draw conclusions from it. And what is most important is that many of them also gave no information about the background noise level, only in the environmental area, which is important for humans. And what we also find that some areas like agriculture, sport and culture and tourism rather seldom in the focus of studies of noise, but definitely they also produce noise, like, for instance, rock festivals, techno festivals near to natural reserves. And the biological responses of other humans and other organisms than humans to noise pollution might be in vocal behavior, movement, physiology, population metrics, vigilance, mating behavior, foraging behavior, direct fitness metrics, or community level metrics. There are differences between the terrestrial studies and the aquatic studies. Soil organisms seems to be understudied. not many studies focus on vibrations and cell organisms. We have also to look on the ecosystem. So we have the gradient urban-rural nature, or nature rural-urban. And many studies are related to urban areas and traffic infrastructure. But studies focusing on effects of noise in rural and natural areas and also biodiversity are rather rare. And if, then they are more focused on effects of disturbance related with noise. There are also studies of acoustics in nature, but they are often focused rather on soundscapes. And also bioacoustic monitoring rarely considers to measure the background noise, but often the background noise is triggering the reaction of the animals. So the interpretation, what is going on, lacks the information about the source very often in bioacoustic monitoring. These are consequences for monitoring. If we look then on changes, here's an example from studies in Spain. In an eco-region, there was a big change between 1995 to 2014 in the number of cars and the traffic intensity and in the length of roads which were built additionally, also migration. And there was overall an increase in noise, in some parts also a decrease. So the geographic distribution of noise might be different and might also change over the time. As we can see here in part B, there was a road built new, and so this introduced more noise in the landscape than before. Overall, the noise level increased between 1995 and 2014, not so in mean, but in the ranges and the extremas, and which were higher. And we can see on the map that there are big differences in the regions between areas with increase in noise, but there were also some areas in decrease in noise, perhaps because the people moved more to cities, living more in cities, and left rural areas. So sometimes changes in the population, in human population density, might have positive effect. Sometimes they might have negative effect, and it is important to bring this information with the propagation modeling into the into maps into the space. There are different conceptual frameworks how environmental noise act and can affect organismic systems. So of course, noise can work on the DNA integrity and genes because of the vibration, destroying molecules, cell structure and signaling, physiological systems, behavioral ecology and community ecology, and with the end of a reduction in fitness. On the left side, these molecular physiological mechanisms are least plastic. On the right side, social mechanisms are more plastic and able also to adapt. And there is already there are already proposals for frameworks which take in consideration these effects on different levels. So level of sensory perception, related then the cognitive processes. Very often we have a masking of signals, so disturbance of the communication. Then we have the physiological responses, behavioral responses between temporal activity patterns and sleep, which may change to over foraging and provisioning efficiency, vocal behavior to vigilance and anti-predator behavior. This has effect on fitness, impact on the survival rate, and on the reproductive success. And then it might have consequences on the population and community level in changes in abundance, occupancy rate, population structure, species competition. Some will deal with it, some cannot deal with this, predator-prey interactions. So it's a lot of consequences and on different levels. There are reports about mitigation for birds, for instance, in cities, maintaining green space and urban planning, reduction of aircraft noise near to airports, placement of new anthropogenic infrastructure more distant from habitats. Timothy mentioned already noise reduction, surfaces, closing roads, temporary. This works on transportation. For industrial use of sound barriers, especially in the marine area. I only focused here on terrestrial. For terrestrial mammals, there was nothing reported about environmental, so in city, urban areas. Some recommendations for setting criteria for height and density of road bordering vegetation or filling gaps in tree lines, creating noise barriers or construction scheduling. There was also a measure in mitigation measure in military, just limiting military training exercises during the calving season and post-calving season of deers, for instance. There are also reports about such measures for reptiles and amphibians, but nothing could be found for invertebrates in terrestrial area, while it is existing partly related to construction noise for invertebrates in the marine area. So, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Reinhard, for this very interesting contribution. I don't know if there are questions for now. We are a little bit behind scheme, and we will have a short break of 5 minutes, and we will perhaps, if Eulalia wants, she can present first, because she also has a deadline and has to leave somewhere, I remember from my emails. So we switch then the presentation of Hendrik and myself with the one of Eulalia and Jaume.
Thank you, thanks. We appreciate that. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. I see there is a hand from Jesus. Yes, please.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the presentation and this project. I would like to ask what is the standard of frequency used when you have to establish the thresholds or the distance where the noise goes far?
We didn't do measurement so far. This is different in the different studies. So it's partly reported in the studies. But a lot. So I used mainly information from the literature for this,
Okay. Are there other questions? Please. Well, we keep them perhaps till the discussion then. And I don't see any hand raised, but I also don't see everyone on the screen. So that sounds a little bit confusing. So we have a break now, and we will start 4 o'clock my time here, 4 p.m. So in 5 minutes, with the one of the presentation of Eulalia Paris and Jaume Fons. So I hope everyone is back after the short break. And as for the next presenters we are very glad to have them. Eulalia Peris from the European Environment Agency and Jaume Fons from the Autonomous University de Barcelona. So we are very happy to have you here today, and we look forward to your contribution. It's about the impact of transport noise on natural areas, and then also about another aspect of noise and rather sound, then the access to quiet green spaces. So I give you the floor, please.
Okay, can you hear me all right? I'm going just to put my... Yes, can you see the full screen? Great.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation to present today. The European Environment Agency published a report that is called Environmental Noise in Europe Report back in June. And within this report, we included an analysis of natural areas that are affected by transport noise, as well as an analysis of accessibility to green areas that are unaffected by noise in urban centers. And we are going to present these two assessments. First, I will give you an overview of the main messages, and then my colleague Jaume Fons from the European Topic Center on Health and Environment that works at the University of Autonomous Barcelona will explain you more in detail the methodology and the details of this analysis. So I'm not sure if you are all familiar with the report, so let me first give you some context on what it is and why we published the report. So this report is published every 5 years, and the reason for that is because its publication is aligned with the reporting cycles of the Environmental Noise Directive. And you already spoke about this directive before, so you probably already know this is a European directive that obliges European countries to report strategic noise maps every 5 years. So in each cycle, we gather and analyze all this noise data that countries submit under the directive. And we analyze it to better understand the magnitude of the noise problem in Europe. So this report includes the latest data that countries had reported, and it also integrates new scientific evidence and developments on noise. There is a big focus on human health because there is more and more evidence showing that noise pollution is a systemic health stressor that affects many different systems in our body. And in the last 5 years, since we published our last report back in 2020, there has really been a steep increase in the evidence between exposure to noise from transport sources and many different health outcomes. So it mainly focuses on health, but we also want to focus a little bit on environment. Because as I mentioned, we have a chapter that looks a bit more in the impacts of noise on natural protected areas, which are protected for biodiversity and conservation purposes. And also to say that the report specifically focuses on noise from transport sources, such as noise from road, railway, and aircraft traffic. And this is because they are the most widespread. This is because also the countries need to submit this data under the directive, so the directive focuses on these sources, and also because the evidence on the negative impacts on health also are mainly coming from these sources. So this is a little bit all the topics covered in the report, and we are going to present you these two. Noise pollution impacts wildlife, both marine and terrestrial. Noise can interfere with animals' behavior, communication, sensory perception, physiology, can disturb predator-prey relationships. You know that much better than I do, so I'm not going to go into this. But what I want to show you is that based on the analysis that we did for the report, we estimate that at least 29% of the total area under Natura 2000 network is exposed to transport noise levels that could be harmful to terrestrial wildlife. Natura 2000 is a network of protected areas covering Europe's most valuable and threatened species and habitats. However, what we see is that these areas are not really protected in terms of noise from transport. And in the map, you can see the green areas that represent Natura 2000 areas that are potentially quiet. And the red areas show Natura 2000 sites that are affected by transport noise. And you can see also that the most impacted natural areas are around Central Europe, Germany, France, Belgium, Northern Italy, where large proportions of these protected sites are exposed to high transport noise levels. And what about natural green areas in cities? Urban green spaces are important not only for biodiversity, but also for people's well-being. Here we take more a people's approach, but of course could be also interesting for you in terms of biodiversity in green urban areas. So these areas are meant to give residents a break from the noise and stress of city life, like a place to relax, recharge, etc. However, what we often see is that many of these green areas in cities are not quiet, even though cities provide green spaces that are meant to support this relaxation and restoration. A large share of them are impacted by noise pollution, especially from road traffic. And we did an analysis of 233 urban centers, and we found that around 50% of the green areas in the analyzed cities are exposed to noise levels of 55 dB or higher. When we looked at accessibility, we found that not many people had access to green and quiet spaces. So, for example, in the cities we analyzed, only 34% of the population had a green area that was quiet within a 400-meter walking distance from their homes. And we also observed some regional differences. Northern European cities, which often have more green space overall, generally offer better access to green and quiet areas compared to other parts. And this a little bit to illustrate what I just explained. And this is from the Urban Center of Paris, because I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago and I had to prepare it for them. So Paris has a relatively good amount of green space. However, only about half of this green space are not affected by traffic noise. And when we look at accessibility, the situation is also quite bad. Only 24% of Paris urban population has access to quiet and green areas within 400 meters of their home. And that's actually below the EU average, which is about 34%. So now I will give the floor to Jaume, who, as I said before, works at the European Topic Center on Health and Environment. And this is a consortium of institutions that work with the EEA. And they made the analysis that I just showed. So he's going to give you all the methodological details. And I don't know how to stop sharing, but Jaume, maybe you can share.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot. Okay, I will share my screen now. This screen. Do you see my presentation right now?
No.
No. Oh.
Okay, now yes.
Okay, yeah, and now on the presentation mode.
Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, thanks a lot again for inviting us to this workshop. Very also very interesting for us to get complementary information. The work I will present has been mainly done by the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and we have cooperating with the A since long time ago. So basically, the complementing what Eulalia explained, the work that we do is a bit different from the research, and it's more trying to answer policy questions or questions that the Commission address. They need some quick reaction or quick answers to better understanding what is going on. And for that is very relevant the work done in the research, what you are doing, because then this basis justifies some of the things that I will present. And so also the work that I will present should be seen from this perspective with the information that is available, what we could provide to answer some very specific questions. So if we are starting with the quiet areas in the open country, as Eulalia said, the main driver is the Environmental Noise Directive, which requires identify and preserve areas of woods acoustic quality. The issue is that there is not any definition on that, and then it's left to the member states to decide how they define this. So here, what the work that we presented is we make a proposal with the data that is available at European level. We could do some evaluation at European level, and then from here we can improve with the best available knowledge. Just to complement, there are, of course, the Environmental Noise Directive specifically requests this, but there are a set of directives, also the Convention on Biological Diversity, that have an impact or relate to the good quality of the ecosystems. Here are listed, indicating if it's terrestrial or also include the marine or water ecosystems. And as Eulalia said, the N directive, the noise directive, it's also very much aligned with the people health. And of course, the noise has an impact on biodiversity, and it's the main topic of your project and justifies that. We don't, so in our approach, we don't try to justify that it has an impact. We already assume because there is scientific evidence, and then we try to capture which areas are potentially impacted. Additionally, about 20% of the European population live in rural areas, so it's also to be considered because it could have the both sides. From one side, having an impact on noise, but also it's people that live in this environment and could take benefit. So how we could define these quiet areas or areas that are not exposed to potentially harmful levels of noise with existing data? One obvious approach with all the limitations that we have seen would be simply taking the noise maps that are available at European level. And from that, we have simple black and white, up to certain noise level. This is noisy, and outside this level or below these levels, it's potentially less affected or unaffected. We have gone beyond that because it would not be the same to having an old dam site with noise levels below 50 decibels or a forest below 50 decibels. So then we try to include two perspectives. One is simply the noise, and the other one is the naturalness, including the perception. I will explain the details later on, but for the naturalness and perception, we start with a land cover, a reclassification based on existing literature, and then we give more weight positive weight to agricultural areas with higher biodiversity, and we give less weight to managed forests, for example, plantations or cutted forests. So at the end are indicators that are normalized from 0 to 1 and multiplied, and we get the final index. So how we develop the noise component? The approach is very simple, but is intended to be developed at European level. And at the end, to get an image or a picture that help to think on the policies and the implementation. So of course, there are so many limitations, but at least provides a first image that help us to understanding different aspects or think how to implement the policies related to the nature protection. So basically, the starting point we have the road and rail network for above certain number of passengers per year. So we call it, or the directive call it, major roads, major railways. And ideally, we have these kind of maps that already presented before, that each color represents a different noise band. And the directive LDN is the 55 decibels is the limit, and also the 50 decibels is depicted. First of all, it's not available for all Europe, and secondly, is not practical for calculation. So what we did, or it would take a lot of resources. So we did a sample of many segments in Europe, and then for each segment, we could calculate what you see on the right side. So we consider that above equal or above 55 decibels, we are in this noisy area and the value is 0. Below 50 decibels, we could consider that, or the potentially harmful impact is very low, and then we give a value of 1. And in between, now we use this fuzzy function that is linear, but it could be adapted with logarithmic or whatever, this area in between. If we do this analysis in many European segments or in a sample, then we can take an average distance. So this average distance, for example, in this case, 500 meters, we'll know that below this distance, the value of the noise component of this whiteness suitability will be 0, and above 1 kilometer will be 1, and in between we'll have this function. So the outcome that we got is for major roads above 6 million vehicles per year, the distance to the 55 decibels is 600 meters. So from the noise source to 600 meters, the value of the index will be 0. And below the 50 decibels, we'll consider the value of 1, the maximum value of suitability, and will be above 1,400 meters. For the traffic is lower, then the distances are lower, and also for railways we have different categories. So then we apply these distances to all the major roads and rails. So this is the noise component. Here is the, let's say, the naturalness and perception component. So basically, we start with Corinne land cover. This is a map of Europe provided by the Copernicus European project. It's freely available, and this is a map of 1 kilometer. That is also information available at 100 meters grid for all Europe, where we have the land cover. We see where are forests, where is agricultural areas, etc. Based on the literature, we group these classes into MROV, or what is the kind of naturalness. We know this is a simple approach, But as I said, it help us to provide a European perspective and helping us or guiding us to think how we implement these policies. So from a starting point, we get an intermediate map. And then because this type of information does not allow us to differentiate exactly if a forest is a plantation or has been cut in recent years, using other remote sensing technologies, we can identify forests that are managed, and then we decrease the value. And there is also a European map called High Nature Value Farmland that indicates those agricultural areas that have potential high biodiversity value. And it's based on combining different information coming from the birds directive, etc. So in that case, we get a positive plus. Here we get a negative points, and then we get the final map. With that, we get this map of Europe going from 0 to 1 to 1 would be the potentially quiet areas, and 0 definitely the areas that have an important stressor coming from the transport. At European level, we easily see that in the where we have lower population density, colors are closer to 1, but also in all the mountains that we have in Europe, there is a lot of relatively quiet. And then in the more dense populated areas or areas with high agriculture, extensive agriculture, the color is also low, or we have lower values. So in general, about 53% of the European land could be considered noisy. So it's the indicator, it's below 0.5. And 15% it's potentially quiet, or so its value is between 0.75 to 1. So it's are the higher values. And in between could indicate areas that where there is a potential for improvement. And here is just to illustrate how we have ranked or classified by classes on this index. And we see mainly the 0, where we really have a strong noise impact, are mainly artificial areas. So here we have different land cover land uses. And as we move to potentially quiet areas in open country, we are getting more forest, but also, for example, wetlands. And also here, so we identify open space with little or no vegetation, are mainly high elevation in the mountains. But then we can move to the protected areas. We would focus, as Eulalie already presented. And here we see how it's distributed among countries. And we see the complexity managing in smaller countries, or for example, an island like Malta, that we already have a transport network that it's difficult to avoid. So sometimes it's not only how we manage it, also there are maybe natural components or constraints that are difficult. And this may be the value of this type of analysis, not being perfect, but helps to understand this. And of course, Finland, Sweden, Ireland have the highest values for the protected areas. Also, we can have a different view and see how this Natura 2000, so is a European network of protected areas that are regulated, how they are managed. And these protected areas can or are classified according to the International Union Conservation of Nature, according to the management priorities. So not all protected areas have the same objective. So the ones here are very strict conservation objectives, like the strict nature reserve, wilderness area, etc. While other ones also include the possibility of certain management. This is relevant because it helps to guide the management and planning for the different protected areas. And what we see is the ones that have a more strict conservation, also the level or the index has the higher, most of their area is in the highest part of the index, more quietness. And for example, protected landscape, where it's the type of plan allows for intensive human interventions, we see where the index has, or we see more a greater area, almost 50% of these protected areas, the index is below the 0.5. So it would indicate potential harmful effects for the biodiversity. Given that they will move to the city and the accessibility, here again we have different policies. I would think the biodiversity strategy also thinks on the cities as a relevant component for biodiversity, but recently has been approved the natural restoration law that all the cities should increase by 3% the green space by 2040, and also the Sustainable Development Goals, which requires the access, universal access to safe, inclusive, and accessible green and public spaces. So how we translate all these nice policy words to the practice? As I said before, the quiet areas, there is not a single definition, and any of these regulations is specified. We have, in a previous study, we reviewed how this is implemented, and we tried to extract the main components that is also available from existing data. Of course, we have the noise limit values coming from the noise map of the noise directive. Then we have the public green areas for predominantly recreation use. So it's also important that there are public spaces. And this is also available through the Copernicus Urban Atlas, updated every 3 years. And this is also publicly available, freely available. And this includes information at 110 meters grid for the major cities in Europe. And finally, we need, if we want to look at the accessibility, we need the street network. And we use it as a criteria, the people that can reach a green, quiet area within a 400-meter walking distance. And this distance is considered that is also feasible to walk this distance for elderly or more vulnerable people, and comes from the UN working group. I will not enter into many details, but just to show you an example in Bordeaux, in France, here we overlay what is the green urban areas from Urban Atlas, so we don't have to process it, it's already available. And then the map. And we see that, for example, here we zoom here, we see that there are certain green areas that are above the 55 decibels. So then we excluded all these areas and we only keep what is below the 55 decibels. The outcome, Eulalie already presented some results. Here, I want to highlight that it's important, the spatial patterns. And here are two examples, Nice and Almere in Netherlands and Nice in France, that all what is colored is the green areas. What is red are green areas that are above 55 decibels, and what is green will be the quiet green areas. And if we look at the percentage of quiet green in the city, it's very similar in both cities, but because the physical setup of Nice, that it's a steepy, has a steepy hills along or very close and the sea, most of the green areas are on the periphery or in steepy areas. Consequently, only 6% of the population could walk to those areas, while in Almere, having the same percentage is more evenly distributed, and most of the population can access a quiet green area, although the area that they could access is smaller, while in Nice is greater. So just looking at this, it also helps to understand some special or limitations that already exist in the city. And for planning, we need to consider these limitations and why it's important already preserve what already exists. Finally, here you have some reference. So I think the presentation will be made available to you. So everything that has been presented here are the corresponding reports where it's documented. And yeah, thanks for your attention. And this is part of the team that has been working in what they have presented. So thanks a lot.
Thank you a lot also. It's a very interesting one, this presentation, of both presentations even, that we got from Eulalia and Jaume. I see that there are questions raised, but I am also the timekeeper, and I am afraid that I have to ask your questions in the chat, and we can perhaps come in the end back to it. We have our own presentation from the legal side. I will try to share my presentation also. So is this working? Yeah. Is this working? I don't see you now.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Yes, it's working here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I will. So it is a shared presentation by Hendrik Schoukens and myself. Perhaps most people are not overly interested in legal stuff, so we will go through it and focus on some points we really want to share with you. So here, there is text. I will not read it all, but in general, noise legislation in many countries is quite old. It is sometimes changed, but it remains old from structure, from the aims, the objectives, and so on. And in fact, this is a bit the same with the Environmental Noise Directive, in the sense that it is very human-centered. So when you look, and we as environmental lawyers, we look to environmental law from a modern viewpoint, and then we say, the Environmental Noise Directive may be a good piece of law, but it is human-centered. So, and when you want to have modern EU law about also the pollutant that noise is, there should be another part in it that aims to protect nature, biodiversity, or the environment, because it is something else sometimes. So there are two problems. It is human-oriented, and there is a limited attention to cumulative effects also. Of course, we have also national law, national legislation, and we looked also in some legislation beyond Europe, in other countries and so on. And you see sometimes modern legislation that has also a very positive aspect. For instance, Costa Rica protects soundscapes. Also, this is a positive development, a good development, I think, not to look to noise only, but like Reinhard also indicated in his presentation, there is also the aspect of sound, in fact, which is good for well-being. So the quiet zones, of course, from the Environmental Noise Directive have a good potential to be a good vehicle, a good instrument to protect also nature. And in some countries, this is also used to protect nature, for instance, in Slovenia and Germany. What we also see, and in fact it was illustrated in the presentation of Jaime, that when there is strict nature protection legislation about protected areas forbidding various sources that create noise, vehicles and other, that of course the problem of noise diminishes. And this, you see that in nature legislation, nature protecting legislation, there is sometimes a whole list of prohibited activities. And this is, perhaps some new ones are not in it. You must also consider drones and so on. And it is also not always easy to control, really. But there is a potential there also. And I see from a scientific view also a correspondence or correlation between land take and land take, suburbanization, and also the infrastructure, which causes transport noise, and the vulnerability of nature, of course. So spatial planning, which is largely a national competence, is very important. We see in several countries there is a policy being developed to restrict land take. But it is a recent thing, rather. So we have then, of course, the impacts are assessed via environmental impact assessment and the appropriate assessment. That's really the term under the Habitats Directive. But of course, you don't catch some other things which are important. For instance, when the vehicles on a certain road are becoming more and more, they increase, you don't catch it. Here there is a case in Flanders, interesting. When you construct a helicopter airport, of course, you have to consider all the flights the helicopters will do and where they will fly. So this is very important, and you see the potential. But when the heli-haven or the helicopter airport is already there, simply fly with the helicopter does not trigger an appropriate assessment. So, and that is the same with motorways. When the motorway is there, the vehicles can augment, but this is not a trigger. It's not triggered. Does not trigger the assessment. With airports, it is a little bit different. If there is a construction being made to extend them, okay, it triggers an appropriate assessment or environmental impact assessment. But also when there is no physical change, it in fact remains the same. So I will now give the floor to Hendrik, who prepared some other interesting things. And if I see his slides, I think he went to Slovenia.
That as well, Geert, last summer. But before doing so, I just in this slide, but unfortunately it's in Dutch, so most people will not be able to grasp the meaning of these excerpts. But these are two excerpts from rulings, recent rulings of the Court of Permit Disputes in Flanders, which assesses the legality of permit applications, and they both deal with noise, and they also are able to show us a quick peek into how noise effects are assessed in the context of protected sites. And the excerpt on the left refers to Vengebied. It is a Flemish ecological network. It's a strictly protected site, and there the competent administration mentioned that there will be some noise related to the construction of road and lorries that will drive there, but they deem it that this is not relevant because it can be it is restorable, it can be compensated. So it's not, you see that there is, I think, a tendency to appraise noise impact as restorable, and as a result they can be authorized. The other excerpt is of a more recent ruling regarding a shooting range, where ultimately the court did annul the permit because it was mentioned in the advice of the nature agency that the previous assessment was no longer up to date, because in the meantime beavers and other birds had settled in the area, and their presence had not been taken into account in the previous assessment. So for the new permit, they could not rely on an outdated assessment. So this was the reason why the noise impact on these animals had not been taken into account, and as a result, the permit was annulled. So there is a tendency to be more strict in terms of legal review of permits on the side of the courts. In any event, here, next slide. Yeah. And then I found this a very interesting case study from Triglav National Park. It's a national park I visited last summer. It's has been established in the beginning of the 80s in Slovenia. It's in the Alps in Slovenia. It's a very beautiful area. And what struck me there is that they also designated quiet zones. So areas in the national parks that were subject to stricter regulations in terms of activities, human activities that were authorized there. And this was linked explicitly to the presence of a couple of animals, amongst others, the capercaillie, the black grouse, also an eagle species, and the chamois as well. So if you go to the next slide, there you see it amounts up to more than 10% of the national park has been designated as a quiet zone. So here you have an illustration of the quiet zone, which has been designated for the capercaillie. And there you see that, amongst others, hiking trails. I didn't portray a map here, but there are no fixed hiking trails in these areas. So human activities are limited there, specifically during the breeding and the rearing season. So I found that very striking. For me, it's one of the few examples I encountered where a lot of focus went into implementing these quiet zones. This has been a recent effort. Here you can go to the next slide. So here you see 134 quiet areas have been designated, covering a staggering 10,000 hectares, which is still impactful in a way. There you again see that it is explicitly targeting these species, amongst others the capercaillie, but also peatlands and bogs are indicated as quiet areas, are designated as quiet areas. And also they make an explicit link with the habitat types and species that have to be protected and restored under the EU Habitats Directive. These quiet zones have also been explicitly designated by a regulation which has been published in the official Gazette of Slovenia. Next slide, yeah. And as a further illustration, in the area, they organize every year also biathlon competitions there. So, in a recent news article, I read that they took specific care of the interaction of these activities with the mating season of the black grouse, because the biathlon competition will take place in March, relatively late, 15th of March, I think, and so they will do everything they stated to limit The impact on the black grouse, the sound and lighting equipment will be kept at a minimum. Site events will not take place in the area as such, but further away in other locations. So for me, it was quite an interesting example of noise. Well, the integration of noise-related impacts in the area management of a national park and a Natura 2000 site. So where does that leave us for the future? What new pathways can we identify? I think there are several scenarios which we can develop in order to enhance the integration of noise-related impacts on biodiversity in the applicable legal framework. I've identified a zero alternative because, as Geert mentioned, of course, and it has also been highlighted by other presenters today, that the European Noise Directive is rather human-centered. That is, of course, true. I will not go and repeat what has been said before. However, of course, several provisions under the European Noise Directive require member states to draw up and draft maps and, in particular, noise action plans. And from a legal perspective, I think it is worthwhile to take into account that the drafting of an action plan under the European Noise Directive might require the carrying out of an strategic environmental assessment as well as an appropriate assessment in any event when the noise action plan is addressing a situation which is located close to Natura 2000 sites. So I think if we want to achieve a better integration of biodiversity related noise impacts, that applying and enforcing the SEA directive, as well as the duty to carry out an appropriate assessment for noise action plans, might be a very useful lever. We don't need to change the directive. It is already applicable legislation that requires you to integrate these elements in a noise action plan. And I have also come across examples from Ireland where they indeed carried out an SEA or a screening for noise action plans, so to ensure that the noise action plan and its content aligns with the conservation objectives, for instance, of a Natura 2000 site. So next slide. Of course, then if we take it one step further, of course, we could also envisage a tailor-made revision of the Environmental Noise Directive. And in the short term, although I read on the website of the European Commission that the fitness check of the directive has kind of given rise to a green light. They stated that the directive is coherent, that a lot of progress has been made, but in any event, it would be recommendable to place more emphasis on the role of quiet zones and the role they can play in terms of also protection of biodiversity. So this might be a tailor-made revision. Of course, if we were to consider a more comprehensive revision of the European Noise Directive, then of course we should make sure that its objectives, I think this is Article, I had it in front of me, Article 2 and the definitions in Article 3 are amended so as to broaden the scope, not exclusively focusing on the impact of environmental noise on humans, but also on biodiversity as such. Of course, the question still remains, is this all a very realistic policy option? Because we all are aware of the fact that the current European Commission is very reluctant into adopting new pieces of environmental legislation that will include more restrictions. Quite the contrary in recent months, and it has become clear that the focus is on deregulation rather than coming forward with new sets of regulations in the context of environmental protection. Of course, there's also a lot of existing legislation which we can use. The Habitats and Birds Directive have been mentioned already. I think, and we have some precedent cases on noise impacts on Natura 2000 sites. Even there is a ruling of the European Court of Justice related to the impact of noise coming from mining activities on brown bears in Spain in a Natura 2000 site. So there it's clear that in theory, I mean, it has been mentioned that the Habitats Directive is an indirect instrument in terms of noise abatement. I would disagree. If noise is a relevant factor for the conservation of a species, the Habitats Directive is a clear lever. It includes clear provisions, a non-deterioration clause, an assessment clause, a specific provision which explicitly outlaws deliberate disturbance of species. So whenever you can, from an ecological perspective, determine that noise impacts have a relevant impact, a significant impact on a specific species, then I think the Habitats Directive can be used to good effect in order to outlaw or at least to minimize the impact of both new activities and projects, but also of existing projects. So here gave the example of an existing airport. Well, Article 6.2 of the Habitats Directive, the non-deterioration clause, can also force, in theory, an authority to revise existing permitting conditions for an existing airport, for instance. It's theory. It doesn't happen a lot, but you can try to enforce it. The nature restoration law has entered into force last year. It's a regulation, and I think there it has been mentioned. It also includes provisions on urban ecosystems that might be quite indirectly very relevant for parks and urban green zones. But I think also more generally speaking, there's also the concept of a good environmental condition, a good condition that is being defined in a relatively broad manner. And again, restoration as such is also defined as a concept relatively large. So reducing noise impact from our understanding can also qualify as nature restoration. It's a form, it's an illustration of passive restoration, but nonetheless, it's restoration. So I think in the national nature restoration plans, which will have to be drafted and will have to be ready in draft version by September next year, also attention is to be placed on noise abatement, and it is a crucial element because, as mentioned, noise impacts are a relevant factor for the favorable conservation status of many species. Then, of course, it's also relevant that if we come forward with new nature restoration projects, of course, nature restoration as such. So nature restoration project as such, they can also help. Of course, they can mitigate noise impacts as well. And we need science-based legislation. I think this might be one of the main lessons from this workshop, that it's hard to come forward with like general noise limits that apply to all species, because all species are, I mean, every species is different, has a different sensitivity. But we need a lot of input from science in order to come forward with more up-to-date legislation, I think, in the context of biodiversity protection when it comes down to noise impacts. And then the last slide. This was already touched upon by Geert. The obvious link with land use policy, of course, if we succeed in limiting urbanization and fragmentation, we will end up with more robust green zones and larger buffer zones. And as a result, I think the impact of noise on biodiversity will be more limited. But of course, again, I think it is clear that this is not a political top priority as such already. And in some countries, it has been promoted, but the impact, the noise-related impacts are seldomly used as a lever here. There are other reasons why they want to limit land use, land takes, but noise is seldomly highlighted as the main reason here. But of course, here, as already mentioned, environmental impact assessment and appropriate assessment. I mean, we should be quite clear about it. Noise is a relevant consideration here. Not merely noise impacts on humans, but also noise impacts on biodiversity as such. they need to be integrated in an environmental impact assessment, in an appropriate assessment where relevant. And again, this can serve as a very powerful lever to upgrade the relevance of noise-related impacts in urban planning as well. So I think there is a lot of potential there in existing legislation as well. Of course, we could also try to revise the European Noise Directive in an ideal world. Yeah, we will see what the future will bring. So Geert, I don't know whether you want to add something.
No, thank you, Hendrik.
Okay, that's it.
I will stop sharing, and I will kindly ask you to keep your questions, and I want certainly to give two other, very sympathetic people from our consortium the chance to say something, Graham, and I do not know if Michael Lomas is also, about the social perceptions on noise and light. Also, we have an inquiry about that. But I want kindly ask also to keep it perhaps within 10 minutes, the contribution, so that we at least have 10 minutes for discussion. Yeah, Graham, will you be able to do that?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me? Is my mic working?
Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. Yeah, my name's Graham Sheriff. I'm from the University of Salford in the UK. I will make this very brief because I need to leave shortly anyway. So my role in the project, along with Mike Lomas from psychology at our university, is the human side of noise and light pollution in Plan B. But of course, we're focusing on noise pollution today. I'm just going to make this a very quick presentation in the end and just talk about why it's important to look at this human side. Although the focus overall of the Plan B project is about biodiversity and wildlife, we want to look at measures that reduce noise and light pollution, and that pollution clearly comes from human activity. So we need to kind of think about what's driving, what's motivating those activities that cause that pollution. And so I'm just going to, it's not changing. Good. Hopefully you can see my slides changing. It seems to be stuck.
No, it's fine.
Okay, good.
Fine.
Right, here we are. So I've just skipped a few slides because I realize we don't have time. So why should policymakers take social drivers and barriers into account when thinking about these issues? To put it another way, how does this research that myself and Mike Lomas are conducting complement work on technical aspects of sound and its impact on biodiversity? So just really quickly, and I won't give kind of detailed examples of these, but we know that health and well-being, human health and well-being, that is, are affected by noise pollution. So there will be some interventions, some synergies, interventions that benefit both people and wildlife. Many people would be very happy if they didn't have, for example, light pollution coming through their windows or traffic pollution outside their door, as in this image. So we might be able to help people and animals at the same time. Many interventions will be contentious in rapidly growing urban areas as we kind of have rapid urbanization and the kind of 24-hour city. Many people will want to be opening, restaurants and clubs and so on, things that make noise. People will be wanting to make deliveries early in the morning. There's all sorts of tensions there in terms of economic activity that also has an impact on people. So we need to be very sensitive to those areas of contention. Some interventions require active support from people. We need to win them over, whether that be through kind of awareness raising, kind of hearts and minds approaches, or incentivization or regulation. So some of these behavioral interventions may be infrequent. For example, purchasing a car, something you do infrequently and you make that decision. But they may also be kind of ongoing. I'm showing slides again. Ongoing, so that might be the day-to-day driving. So although you've made that decision to buy a car, you then decide daily, you decide how to drive it, whether to speed through residential areas, whether to brake suddenly, whether to rev the engine outside someone's house. So you're always making decisions about that behavior. Interventions may place restrictions on what people can do, and we need to understand experiences. We need to understand their experiences so we can increase compliant levels and make regulations fairer. That's obviously important anyway, but it's also important we think about making regulations that are fair, that don't discriminate against certain parts of the population. And finally, some interventions, even if they're not aimed at behaviour, may change behaviour in a way that we maybe don't expect, but that isn't good in terms of social impacts. This example, I know this is light pollution, not noise pollution, but it's an example of a bus stop that's quite poorly lit. People may feel unsafe using that bus stop and may choose not to travel by public transport, not to travel at all, or they may actually end up driving and therefore creating more noise. So we need to think about how interventions might affect behaviour, not necessarily in the ways that we expect, and how they may affect certain parts of the population. So what we're doing as part of our work package in Plan B is a literature review around this, which is partly what I've just been talking about, and now a large international survey on public perceptions of noise and light pollution to understand some of the factors that influence people's acceptance of measures. Measures to reduce light and noise pollution, and also what might influence their willingness to change behaviour. So as a kind of takeaway from this, what I hope you will do is go to our survey. You can use this QR code, please, or the link there, which I'll try and put in the chat as well. And that's the simple thing anyway, but the bigger ask, if you can, is send this to your networks, please. We want to promote it far and wide. It doesn't have to be people interested in noise pollution. In fact, it's better if it isn't. So think about networks you could send it to, and please contact me at that email address showing there, and I can send you like kind of promotional images and sample text and stuff to make it easy for you to send it onto your networks. So yeah, I'm happy to leave it there unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Graham. So this was also very interesting and very quick. You did us a great favor also in that. So we have now, and I'm gonna wait for the questions a little bit and share my screen again for some discussion things. So we prepared a list of 4 slides for discussion, but I can show them. I will not read them. The most of the things we already said it, so I don't have to repeat it. And in fact, you should, as participants, have the chance to say something. So I will do it very short. I will just show the slides. You already saw this one. The second one, it's about, Dick could give some guidance, could say something, but I think it was already mentioned in his presentation also. So there is need for other prediction models, other noise maps in complementary, in fact, to Knossos, because it is very suited for humans, but not for the animals. An idea that we certainly also have is we should stress the positive thing about noise and then more sound. There are some bioacoustically pristine areas. You have not only quiet areas, but the very, very, very quiet. And I think even at the European level, one should do something with it, not by changing legislation or something, but to keep that, to bring that in attention. Henrik already stated also there is the relation that in fact the conservation objectives and the nature restoration law at the European level, in fact, yeah, you have to do something as member state also to take away the current pressures that there are on biodiversity, and this encompasses also noise measures. So, and the most important one was on the fifth slide. Have you other ideas? And I think Jana Yakushina will further moderate this discussion. So please, Iana, and I will perhaps stop sharing my screen now.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for today's really interesting discussion. I think we heard from different parts of noise, as we can say. We discussed the biological, technological, and regulatory part. So now I invite you to maybe raise the questions which you had earlier to the speakers, and we didn't have time. And also maybe reflect more specifically due to time constraint on what he just presented, the main points of the noise pollution policy brief. Is there any brave people to start the discussion? Or any questions? Yes, Jorge, please.
Well, I can say something about it. Was really a nice workshop. But what I'd like to mention it's the fact that we are always based our analysis on the European Noise Directive. And the European Noise Directive normally does not cover all the noise impacts in the territory, because the European Noise Directives are especially focused on the large agglomerations, large major roads with 3 million passage per year, in railway infrastructure, 30,000 passage per year, and big airports does not really cover the whole territory. So the information the European Union have about this is not complete, in my opinion. We had a meeting with the European Commission in 2017, and we start the idea to revise the directive. It was very difficult to revise the directive. So 2017, from 2017 up now, it's 8 years, or almost 8 years, 9 years. Nothing is done about the revision of the directive. And I think it's not really easy to promote any kind of revision of the European Noise Directive. And I think it's better, in my opinion, to and I read the comments from Eulalia, and I really support the comments from Eulalia.
Thank you for this. I also very grateful for her comments. Unfortunately, she has to leave. We have some comments on the chat, which I want to read from Anna. We can also acknowledge that the 24-hour economy is not healthy at all, not for humans and not for animals and plants. Yes, but I don't think it's possible to kind of change it. But it's possible maybe to introduce mitigation measures indeed, especially for like festival activities for both light and noise. We can make, Anna also wrote, we can make other choices in Europe different from USA, which drives on only economic, McDonald's culture, and more bigger and bigger events. Okay, do we have any other comments regarding the future policy brief specifically? Are there any measures which we can consider to include and communicate to the European Commission, other than which we discuss?
Jana, can I ask?
Okay, yes.
Because I was absent for a couple of minutes, sorry for that. But from the last intervention, I understood that indeed it is quite unrealistic to hope for a revision of the European Noise Directive, right?
Yeah.
Has there been any specific?
That's my opinion.
Yeah, but it's important that, I mean, I assume that in the current climate, it's not easy to create new environmental laws at the EU level.
I can add that the idea was to revise the directive, and I think in 2019, the European Commission had contracted an institution to analyze what could even benefit if all the countries apply the existing current measures to improve the environment, the quality of the environment. And I think it was the chosen institution was the TNO, who has produced a report about that. I think it is published in the European site. You can check that. But my opinion, well, I have been involved and Dick also was involved in this in the discussions since 2017. It's not easy. I don't know. I don't say strictly that it's impossible.
No, of course it's still possible.
But that's what I would like to mention.
Yeah,
I don't think it's possible. Dick, please.
There are a few things. First of all, about the Environmental Noise Directive, as Jorge correctly said, it stops at the big agglomerations and main roads. And as we saw in the presentation about the suitability index, the quietness suitability index, everything above 55 was considered unsuitable. So that's exactly what the European Environmental Noise Directive is calculating. So everything that's calculated is not suitable. So it's easy. Everything where you calculate, you can exclude it. The other thing is that, from my feeling, member states need to comply to Environmental Noise Directive. And if you change it, it's going to be more work. More work means more money. Everybody is tight on money these days for several reasons. But if you listen to our local politicians, also our local environmental people, they have to be efficient. They have to reduce the costs. So if you make the calculation more complex, they have to see where it has an advantage. And another thing that's I think critical that we can show that. Maybe we need to come up with simpler ways of doing things. But another thing I got from the discussion today or from the comments also is that we forgot to think a little bit recently about situations where everyone can win, both the biodiversity and the human. Right? So the tranquil areas, of course, but that's something, if a measure is good for both, it's probably going to be more acceptable to spend money on that. Of course, some are going to be conflicting, but I think that needs to be somewhere in our key messages in the policy brief to try to get a win-win situation with this very productive species, reproductive species that the human is, and that dominates most of the biodiversity. So we cannot make sure the success of that species is reduced. We don't want that probably, so we need to find a compromise.
That's a good message. Actually, it's one of the key ideas, I think, for the future noise pollution policy brief. The awareness should be there that it's beneficial for both humans and nature and the biodiversity, and that may drive the discussion, maybe not on the amendments of the directive, but rather the implementation of the existing directive, as Hendrik was mentioning. Okay, we are at the time, actually, when we have to wrap up, because the finish was at 5:15. So I'm gonna make the last call of anyone if you have some final thoughts on this regard, and feel free to add. Anyone?
A
very brave person.
Yes. When do you think we will have the draft of the policy brief on noise ready?
Geert, that's the question to you, I think.
Well, it will. We are busy with that, but the draft, it will be in short time. It is only 2 months that we have, so we are bringing all things together. So, but it will not be before the new year starts. So, at the end of January, it must be finished. So it is somewhere in between. Huh? Yeah.
I think we will try to keep our advisory board on the loop when we will have a draft. So Jorge, I will send the emails, or Geert will send the emails around with the draft or whatever text we'll have, so we can try to do similar to what we did with light pollution thing. Reinhard, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should still have a discussion with Aquaplan together. I feel it's really necessary that we produce a harmonized thing and show also the differences in marine so it needs perhaps different approaches, but yeah, we should speak with one voice and everything should be clear.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with that. Okay, now I think we're kind of wrapped up. I think Dick's message was the main in the end about kind of connecting the messaging. So I will hang the fort back to Geert to close the event. And from my side, thank you everybody for your great presentations. I learned a lot. Now I broaden my knowledge from light pollution to noise a little bit more. Thank you.